Kids, today I want to talk to you about the recent marriage equality ruling from the United States Supreme Court and what it means, not only to gay people, but to everyone. And I also want to share my view not only on that ruling, but what it means truly going forward in a sober way. Now, truly Friday and well into Saturday um, was a huge celebration for anyone that believed in marriage equality or just equality in general. It was an amazing time. I personally choose my friends carefully, and I have little tolerance for a lot of negativity. So I got a party on my Facebook. It was like a huge global block party, full of happiness and hope and um, relief and emotions and everything else. Now, I had some other friends report to me that there was another side of Facebook, which frankly I don't get to see because I'm not in their algorithm, thank the Lord, um, that was violently angry and hateful and pissed, and it was just this, um, what somebody called an angry national funeral, um, literally. Now, I'm glad I wasn't invited to that party because that doesn't sound like a fun party to me, personally. But let's get on with the ruling. The ruling brings gays and lesbians and transgenders and bisexuals one step closer to normality, which is basically what the whole issue is, normality. Now, if you think that you're a patriot, no matter what you believe about homosexuality, let's just look at our Constitution. If you call yourself a patriot at all, and you say that you believe in our Constitution at all, then it's there in black and white. All men are created equal. Period. Didn't say except for gays, except for women, except for blacks, except for this, except for that. He didn't say that. He just said all men are created equal. Period. That's supposedly one of our foundation documents and one of our goals, or one of the things that we as Americans strive to to be. Now, it's interesting that although all men are created equal, in that same breath, politicians foist this idea upon us as Americans that we are exceptional. Now, if we're all created equal, then how can we be exceptional? Exceptional is not equal. Exceptional is better than. Which is where this whole argument with religion, with politics, with everything begins. It begins with the ego. Because we truly don't believe, we haven't grasped that whole concept of all men are created equal. And we don't want to. Most people don't want to, no matter who they are. They want to believe, even on a micro level in their own little world with their own friends and family, that some people are better than others and da 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 da, and they're superior in this way and yada yada yada. That's just the nature of humans in this country and in most other countries too. It's called ego. It causes about 99.9% of all the problems in the world, along with fear and doubt. Now, we have as a nation gone through a series of progressions. And I know that's a dirty word for some people, progression, but that's what it is. We did not stay If you take the Bible, for example, which is like an Iron Age um, document from antiquity, we didn't just stay in antiquity. Life moved on. People moved on all over the globe. Even the oldest religions, people have evolved and changed, and life has changed, and things that didn't exist back in the days that these documents or these stories were written um, weren't even conceived of then. They didn't have cell phones. They didn't have Snapchat. They didn't have YouTube. They didn't have, you know, the Daily Show or the Tonight Show or Fox News or any of that. None of it. So to try to compare or bring back life to a time that will never happen again is simply illogical. The same thing with people that, quote, want to go back to the basis of the founding fathers. The founding fathers didn't all agree on anything, and the documents prove that. They had a discussion. So what they tried to do was make these grand ideals and let people discuss it and then make up their minds. And all men created equal was one of them. I think that's the preamble or something. Anyway, in the actual Constitution, it says that black people are not full people. They're not 100% people. That was actually written in the Constitution. But yet it says all men are created equal. So right there, they didn't even read their own document. Nobody edited. Nobody edited or even thought to edit, because you can't have it both ways. Now, at that same time, and since antiquity, women have been playing a subservient role. They're generally uneducated. They're generally abused, and they're stepped on in society all over the globe. Not just in the Middle East or Africa or Asia, but right here in the United States. And right here in the United States today, in 2015 and in 2014, I have personally seen on video and read of at least 3 or 4 women that are leaders in right-wing politics that are white women that have called for women's vote, the right to vote, to be taken away. Something that women fought for a long time and earned in the 1920s. And we have women in 2015 saying that women are not capable of voting because they're too emotional or they're too stupid or they're whatever. Now, that's shocking to me. How any woman could look herself in the eye and say, I just can't do that. I just shouldn't be able to vote because I'm too emotional and I need to be under the thumb of some man. I mean, really? Then why don't you move to the Middle East? You can be one of 40 women under the thumb of one man, if you like tradition, because that's where the Bible really started, back when men had multiple wives. It wasn't this one man and one woman thing that everybody pretends it was. Marriage has changed dramatically over the centuries. And still to this day, in some countries and in some religions, polygamy is very common. Actually, it is the rule. Not, so these arguments that fundamentalism and blah, 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 should be, we should somehow move back to a time that never was, because people pick and choose. Even on the right, people pick and choose what the past or the fundamentalism really was, and they don't always agree on every point, and that causes even more confusion, and it causes anger and frustration. But if you look at where human beings are going in general, life continues to move forward, whether you like it or you don't like it. And you can't stop it. There's no way to ever stop that. Because where there's a will to move on or walk down the path or do whatever, or swim across the lake or swim across an ocean or fly around the world or whatever it is that men and women dream of, no government anywhere can stop that. Because people will do it. They'll find a way. They always have, and they always will. And the idea that we need to, somehow go back to some fantasy land that never existed, ever, is obscene. Truly. Now, to the to the gay brothers and sisters out there, the bisexuals and transsexuals and assorted other folks. First of all, congratulations on getting up to a little bit of normality. It's one step. But don't get too happy, because for every big step we take forward, there's going to be a little pushback. And this little pushback is going to be potentially violent. And by that I mean you look at women's rights and women's rights to vote in this country, granted a long time ago. But they never actually really passed the women's rights movement of the 70s. So women are still kind of second-class citizens, which is why they don't make as much as men, etc. And why some of them have this fantasy that they are not even capable of voting, but yet they're capable of leading political parties and opening their big fucking mouths, but yet they're not. So they can lead a political organization, but they can't vote. That doesn't make sense to me. It shouldn't make sense to anyone. If you're in charge of a political party and you're a woman, and then you're telling people that women that they're too stupid to vote or too emotional to vote or incapable of voting correctly, then what are you doing talking in politics? Go home, bake a cake, make some cookies. Here you go. There's a nice one from the 90s. Go bake some cookies. Insane. Women have fought so hard for their rights. And even in this country, they have not achieved their goal yet. Then you get to black folks. Black folks, we had a whole civil war over that. And, ending slavery and all that kind of stuff. And that civil war has never ended. Now, what people don't like to talk about, especially white people, is that after the Civil War, all chaos and manner of just willy-nilly murders and just vicious attacks happened for years after the Civil War, because our nation was in turmoil and chaos. And some of the most heinous crimes that this country's ever committed on itself happened during that period. And you still have these people that, and mostly white and Southern, that like to put up the Confederate flag and have Southern pride. What is it to be proud of? You're not a patriot. You fought against the United States of America. You seceded and started a war against the country you live in. That's not patriotic. That's nothing to be proud of. And you got your ass kicked because you were just wrong. You were on the wrong side of history on that one. And it didn't just happen here, it happened around the globe. That practice ended. Now, it's been replaced with modern day slavery, which is sex slaves and all these other, these contract workers that go from poor countries to the Middle East and are just abused and treated like shit, and sometimes not paid and held hostage and raped and all this kind of stuff. That happens every day. They're still taking kids and women from Africa and and all these poor countries all over the world. They're turning them into sex slaves and domestic slaves, and some they just murder for the sake of murdering. So slavery itself, the whole process hasn't ended, but traditional black slavery ended. Not just here in Britain, all over the globe that happened. So if you think you have Southern pride, think what Southern pride is. It's just racist, and it's just narrow-minded, and it's just rebellious. But you can't call yourself a patriot and be rebellious. It doesn't make sense. The logic train again falls off the track. Now, with the black folks, after the Civil War, things still weren't right. Then it took until the late 60s to finally get things legally right. But then it was winning the hearts and minds of people, which you haven't done yet. And despite a huge effort on the government's part and the major networks part with TV and radio, trying to introduce black people to white society as regular human beings and not some sort of animal or a monkey or, you know, half a person. Literally, and this is just the truth, we had shows, you know, suddenly black people started showing up on television shows and being part of social parties. And then they started having their own series. We had Good Times and the Jeffersons and this and that. Okay, the Cosby Show, all this kind of stuff. Working overtime to bring black people into society and normalize them. But in all that process of pushing to normalize black people, in the same time, all this forced integration was causing a rift in what was traditionally black people's one of their strongest assets, which was black families, which have now become a complete dysfunction. Because as soon as they gave black people rights, the white people turned around and just started arresting all the black men. So it broke up, it just made black society completely fall apart. Literally fell apart at the seams. Still struggling because white folks are still putting black folks in jail in record numbers. That's just a fact. And you have some black folks out there now that have their heads so far up the white man's ass, they're talking like white folks. And they sound ridiculous. It's absurd. How do you defend something that so profoundly affects so much of your race and your families? It doesn't make any sense to me. And then we have the gay issue. We blew off women in the 70s and the bra burning and the whole thing, and that never ended up really passing. So women are still sitting there kind of bubbling, but they really never got their full voice, and somehow they've just gotten passive about it, and that's okay. And then we had Stonewall, and we started the gay revolution. And that wasn't an easy fight, and that was ugly. And it really got ugly in the 80s, really ugly. Because besides there was this huge push for popularity, like on MTV and all, you know, popular culture that accepted gay people and the whole gender bending Regular guys put on makeup and got dressed up in funky clothes like costumes and basically sang and had a good time or whatever. Um, that started a huge backlash with the right and the Christians. Now, we'll get into the Christians in a second. Then you also had the AIDS crisis, which didn't make anything any better because, again, ignorance ruled the day, and suddenly AIDS became a gay disease. AIDS was never a gay disease. AIDS didn't start out as a gay disease, and it has not ended up as a gay disease. It is still primarily a heterosexual disease. But what it really is a human disease that some humans started by having sex with animals, which is fucking nasty. Period. Fucking nasty. And then decided to share it with the rest of the world. Isn't that special? Now, gay people. Do you remember Roe versus Wade? When people fought for abortion rights. Because women were dying in back alleys all over this country since this country was founded. Because abortions were not legal. And Roe versus Wade happened. And suddenly, women had the right to their own bodies and their own reproductive choices. And that was a big threat to men. A huge threat to men. And if you were pro-choice, suddenly you were pro-abortion, which has never been the case. I have never met anyone in my life that says, I want to get pregnant and I want to have abortion after an abortion after an abortion after an abortion. I want to keep getting pregnant and keep having abortions. That is absurd. It is ridiculous. I have never met anyone, and I don't know anyone that's ever met anyone that's ever had that outlook. But yet, that's popular opinion. And what happened since Roe versus Wade in the Supreme Court? You had this backlash. You had this conservative right-wing, thing that's now melded with Christianity and everything else, and it's just one big mishmash of I can't even describe it. It's a mess, and obviously 15 presidential candidates later, we can see what a mess it is. You had this huge backlash. You've had people trying, states and the federal government, trying to whittle away at Roe versus Wade until they get it basically removed. So women can no longer have abortions or health care, which is, again, obscene. And women put up with it. And some women even fight for their right not to have that right, which doesn't make any sense, again, to me. But free choice. And then we had the backlash where they started bombing abortion clinics and Planned Parenthood places. Remember all those bombings, those terrorist bombings? We had those in this country. That really happened in my lifetime. I saw that on TV. And it wasn't just one. And it just didn't happen at clinics. Somebody walked into a church and shot a doctor. And that doctor wasn't black. That doctor was white. And they walked into a church and shot him. So whenever these people, these Christians, these conservatives tell you that they are, they're Christians and they believe in God and they fear God and they respect God and all this kind of stuff, they don't. They've been burning churches since the first black church ever opened. They have been shooting and bombing churches since black people started building churches. They go into their own white churches and shoot people they don't agree with or they don't like. Now, if church is so sacred, that wouldn't be happening. And interestingly enough, black folks that adopted this supposed white religion, Christianity, um, and they bought it lock, stock, and barrel. And they're usually more fervent about it than even most of the white folks are. Um, it's blowing up in their face, and they're not seeing that. But they're so fervent about it, and yet they're suffering because of it. Because white Christians don't necessarily think black Christians are equal or deserve to be, talking to God or praying or anything else. They're relatively hateful. So racism has not gone away. And if you think it has, you're absolutely full of shit. You have your head up in your ass and you're in denial. Because I see it every single day. I see it with the most open-minded of people, or supposedly the most spiritually in tune. I've seen it with psychics and clergy and different things that will make jokes about Michelle Obama being a porch monkey, or all these other just ridiculous old time stereotypical things, and they think it's funny. It's not fun. It shows just how out of touch and how in denial they really are. And they are really in denial. White folks have their heads right up their own ass. And they just think it's beautiful up there because that's their white paradise. And they are in denial for so many things. And they get angry when any other white person tells them that. And they get hysterical if anybody that's not white tells them. But they get really pissed at white people for calling them out on their shit. And I'm calling you out on your shit. And I'm so white I'm blue. Literally. Now, we get to gays. If you think this marriage thing is going to go smoothly, and if you think there's not going to be a social backlash, y'all gays have your head up your ass and you better get the glitter out of your eyes because it's a coming. A couple things, though, are happening in this country that are changing the dynamic overall in the greater picture. As the right has lurched harder and harder and harder and harder to the right over the decades, they have been losing people because they're traumatizing their own people. I have dealt with so many people with religious PTSD and specifically Christian PTSD and some Muslim PTSD as well. Religion is becoming this extremist thing, and it's getting more violent and it's getting more intolerant, and they're getting intolerant of each other, and they're, quote, purging the ranks because they only want the most pure. That kind of sounds like what Hitler wanted for Germany and what white Christians voted in and approved in Germany. Because Hitler didn't do that on his own. It was white Christians that voted that in and got that done. So if you think Christians are such neat folks, modern history will show you not so much. And ancient history until today will definitely prove that point. And let's not forget, we had Northern Ireland and the Catholics against the Protestants. That was also in my lifetime, and it wasn't that long ago. This is white Christian versus white Christian war in a civilized country. It happens. So we have a long way to go on all fronts. And if you think we don't, you're wrong. Because if you really honestly believe that all men are created equal, and you don't start casting judgment on other people, then all men are not created equal, are they? Not at all. So when we finally get to that ideal, then we can start having a productive conversation on where do we go from here. But until then, and the media plays the people against each other. They play not only whites and blacks and Latinos and Asians against each other, they play men and women against each other, they play different religions against each other, they play straight and gay against each other, they play Christians against each other, they play gays against each other, they play gay transgenders against each other. It's this total circus, and we buy into it every single day. If you really sit and read and then put it in a larger perspective, you can see when someone's just writing a news article just to stir up some shit. And most of them, that's all they're doing is just stirring up some shit. And you buy into it hook, line, and sinker. And it's not just the right in Fox News, it's the left too, and it's the center. Because the center is the ones that tune out because, oh, this is too much and it never matters anyway. And, oh, we're so helpless. And we just don't care because, it's ugly. Pull your head out of your ass. When you're complicit and you don't participate one way or the other, you are a huge part of the problem. Because if the center actually spoke up and said, right, left extreme, shut the fuck up, we're coming right here, this is how it's going to be, that's how it's going to be. But instead, the center just sits there like, or basically with their thumb up their ass and lets these two little fractions just run the world in this nation and around the world, literally. So I'm happy about gay marriage. I personally suffered deeply for years, for decades, for this moment. And I mean suffered. I was right out there on the front lines. Lost the family, was forced into a hospital, you name it. Thrown out and made homeless, abandoned. I put my ass on the line to be counted and have a voice. So I'm proud that we're making a step. But at some point, the things that we've all been fighting for, women and men and blacks and gays and Latinos and everybody, all these things we've been fighting for is what? Just to be treated equally. We all pay taxes, we all should be treated equally. Equal taxation, equal representation. Period. That's all. You can't tax somebody and then not give them their rights at the same as you tax somebody that you give other rights to. It's just not, it doesn't work in a democracy. It doesn't work like that at all. And that's part of the problem. We're forgetting the basics. All men are created equal. We just all want to be equal. We just all want to be, quote, normal or normalized. But you can't be normalized if you're an extreme feminism, if you're extreme feminist. You can't be normalized if you're an LGBT warrior. And let me tell you, the LGBT movement has gotten as bad or worse than the Tea Party. They've gotten mean and nasty. They turn on each other like that. And if you speak, even gay people, if you don't agree with the party line, they come down on you like a ton of bricks, just like the Tea Party will. They'll cut you off at the throat. How can you be equal? You can't. We can even throw in ageism. That's all over our society. Treating old folks really bad. Treating young folks really bad. Somehow it's just kind of this, late 20 something to mid 40 something is, the only people that really count. And they're the only ones that should have an opinion and run things and whatever. It's absurd. We're not thinking as a nation. You shouldn't be mad because we have marriage equality. And you shouldn't put your head up your ass and don't think there's not racism. Because I'll tell you how racism really happens. I'll use a personal example. The folks that adopted me, my parents that are dead now, they taught me things. They taught me what they knew. And I came from an older generation. So, things I learned. Black folks weren't like white folks at all. But the one thing black folks had going for them was, quote, strong families, but that was breaking down. Latinos, and particularly Mexicans, were lazy but friendly, and actually they were lazy but really industrious because they'd be hired as like the nanny to take care of their kids, or like I had a Mexican nanny. She was wonderful. She worked her ass off. So you can't hire somebody to take care of your kids and work them to death and then tell them they're lazy when they're not. It doesn't, again, the logic train. You have to look at the big picture, and when the logic train goes off the rails, you got to recognize and say, hey, you know what? This isn't really making sense. Even though I believe this or I learned this, this is not making sense. I said back in 2005 that there was a group of conservative folks out there that are aching and dying to have another civil war. And it's been getting worse every year. And just the other day, some 21-year-old kid that learned all this from his parents and the people he hung around, these white folks, that black folks were these horrible things that were stealing and raping their women and all this kind of stuff, went in and massacred a whole bunch of black folks in a Christian church where he was invited in to pray. And you listen to Fox News and they can't wrap their head around the fact that he's racist. He said he was. He was wearing racist stuff. He made racist videos and rants and jokes and everything his whole life. And he had started getting in trouble with the law before his 21st birthday. And then his father bought him a gun for his 21st birthday. So how do you buy a troubled person a gun and that's extremely racist and don't think there's not going to be a problem at some point? How do you deny that? You can't. There's no denying it. You can try, but it doesn't work. And in your heart of hearts, you should know it doesn't work. And if you don't, you need to see a psychiatrist and a psychologist because you have a problem, a huge one. Get medicated. Nothing's going to get cute overnight. Nothing's going to change. There's going to be no miracles. There's going to be people that are going to fight gay marriage, and there's going to be states that are going to go out of their way to make religious freedom laws and all this kind of stuff, just like they tried to cut down Roe versus Wade. Expect it to happen. But the nice thing is, because religion has gotten so extreme and because the right has gotten so extreme, people are leaving church and people are leaving the right in record numbers because they just can't go that far and they're just not that pure. And then when they get viciously attacked, either at church or on social media or at a party or whatever, um, by their friends, suddenly they get traumatized because their whole world has just collapsed. Now they're going to have to come find a whole new life. And they're going to have to start unlearning some of the things they learned because now life is showing them that they simply weren't true. And that's going to be a process. But in the meantime, we have a generation this started in the 80s with this religious pushback. Suddenly, everybody wanted their kids out of public schools. They wanted religious schools. They wanted homeschooling. It became all the chic. Now, what happens when you homeschool your children? They learn what you teach them. And if you're not very worldly and you have your own ideas and you're kind of insular in your opinions and you never go outside of those opinions, then that's what you're dropping on your children. And they're going to come out just like you. And you're going to encourage them to be maybe even a little worse. So, like this 21-year-old kid, we have this little army that's going to come out and then have to face the big world when, they have to leave mom and dad's and realize that everything wasn't this picture that they got taught. And suddenly there's a world out there. And they're going to have trouble. And there's going to be some ugly messes. But it's slowly getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And it's just going to be a process, but it's not going to happen overnight. That's just the facts. Anyhow, I think I've gotten my point across that this is big, but it's not that big. This is not the end all and be all of freedom because women still don't have it. Blacks still don't have it. I mean, come on. And the idea that the religious people are being persecuted is another fantasy. Religious people are not being persecuted. Religious people are getting exactly what they serve. And if you don't serve intolerance, you won't get it back, Christians, because you're really not Christians. And I hate when you use the word Christian. And I hate when you talk about Jesus Christ, because he rolls over in his fucking grave every time you do, with all that hate and intolerance. It's absolutely absurd, and it's rude, and it's just unimaginable, because you wouldn't know Jesus if he walked up and slapped you across the face. So next time you have something nasty to say, call yourself what you really are. You're a Paulist. Read your Bible. How many books are written by Paul? How many books are written by Jesus? Not one by Jesus, but most of them by Paul. And Paul wasn't even around when Jesus was alive. He supposedly saw Jesus in a vision much later. Now, that means besides you have to believe in Jesus Christ, you have to believe more that some random guy had a vision of talking to God and then formed a church. And then they took his books over the people that were actually there, and they made that the bulk of the Bible. That's a Paulist. That's not Christian. You can call yourself whatever you want, but the truth is you're a Paulist. And you even misquote Paul, which makes it even sicker. So, I've said enough. Good luck, everyone. I hope that the right starts to see this as a positive thing and starts to come to grips with reality. I hope the left doesn't get themselves in this dizzy, lightheaded, oh my God, everything's lovely now situation. And both sides, everyone needs to look carefully at their own lives and say, do I really believe everyone is created equal? And am I acting that way? Because until we all do, I don't think one of us has, I certainly haven't, then we're not living up to our dream, our potential, what was set forth for this nation. And thinking that we're exceptional is the worst thing we can do. It's arrogant, it's just egotistical. And it goes against the grain of what our nation was set up to be. And you can't deny it, it's in black and white. So, enough for my long rant. But I wanted to get these points out because they're not covered a lot in the media. And I think it's really important because there's no innocent parties in this country. None of us. Gay, straight, Christian, atheist, Jew, Muslim, young, old, white, black, whatever you are, whatever sub thing you are, whatever sub thing you are, there's no innocent parties. Friday, I'll make this last one. Friday, on social media, people were losing friends in groups that had nothing to do with politics or sexuality or anything else because of vitriol over the Supreme Court. And some people showing support for it and some people being angry that people were showing support for it. And I'm talking things like gaming groups and aviation nerds and paranormal investigation groups and all these kind of things that have nothing to do with politics or religion necessarily, started falling apart. And people on both sides were shocked and horrified as they were deleting each other and getting deleted. And they're all having like this PTSD, and they're all talking about, what a wonderful day, and also what a nightmare it turned out to be for so many people. Thankfully, I didn't have that, but I pick my friends a little bit more carefully these days, and I don't have a lot of tolerance for negativity and bullshit. So try to do the same. And don't just stick with somebody that always agrees with you. Be ready to have an intelligent, non-passionate, broad view discussion on an issue. You might still disagree, but the more we discuss it in a rational, non-emotional way, the more we're going to come to understand each other, and then we'll stop screaming at each other, and eventually we can get back to doing things together. Because we used to always do that before we all got sectioned off and threw each other in little boxes. And don't let the media keep doing that to you. They're sucking you in. They sold out a long time ago. All of them, across the entire spectrum. Now we have media. You can choose a billion different media outlets, online and on cable and everywhere else, that will tell you exactly what you want to hear, the way you want to hear it, on any particular topic you want to hear about. Check it out. That's the facts. Talk to you later.